I've been thinking about this passage, which thank you, Fred, for reading to us, about building the house on the rock or on the sand. And I was thinking, how can I retell this story in a way that will feel more real? And I imagine Jesus and maybe one of his friends as a young man walking from Nazareth, which was a very small village. Nazareth was a village of maybe 200, 300, 400 people. And the houses there were built in caves, or if not in caves, then at least on the rocks. But in order to go to work, there was no work in Nazareth. In order to go to work, they would have to walk all the way to the city of Capernaum, which you might have read about in the Bible. That's where Jesus did a lot of his ministry, in Capernaum. They'd have to walk up and down the hills to get to Capernaum, which was built on the sea. And I don't know if Jesus ever actually saw a building in Capernaum fall into the sea or not, but I like to imagine that maybe he did. And that as he was rebuilding that house, he was preparing for his ministry. Jesus had a home. Jesus had a context and a past, and that context informed what he said and how he taught. Jesus' teachings were not esoteric philosophy. They were not very sophisticated, you might say, and yet they were powerful because it was real. It was real. Jesus had lived it. And I wanted to reflect on this passage a little more, and then I want to move to some of the broader context. What is Jesus trying to tell us in this simple parable? Whoever hears these sayings of mine and does them, I will liken him to a wise man who built his house on the rock. What is Jesus communicating to us? Whoever hears these sayings of mine and does them, I will liken him to a wise man who built his house on the rock. Is Jesus helping us to understand how to build houses? That'd be pretty useful, wouldn't it? That's a useful skill. Maybe some people who built some houses in floodplains might have done well to learn from this. Maybe having to walk a bit further, having to travel a bit further to work is worth it to not have your house flooded. Is that what Jesus is trying to teach us? Well, I wouldn't disagree with that. It's not that we can't take that from this, but Jesus was saying that as a matter of common sense, wasn't he? He was saying that as a matter of, everyone knows that you should build your house on the rock, not on the sand, right? So while it is true, it is not the point that Jesus is trying to make. Do you see that? So there's a lot of things in the Bible where we read them and we're like, oh, that's interesting. But it's not actually the point. What you're reading is basically ancient history, things that people talked about and knew, and things that happened in ancient history. And it's all interesting, but it's not the point, right? When I was looking up this morning in Sabbath school, it's amazing how the topics are so often similar. I was looking up that word remnant because I saw it come up in the text. And almost every single word for remnant in the Hebrew Bible, almost every occurrence of that word is actually where it says, and the rest of the history of this such and such, you can find this in a different book. And I always found that frustrating because when I was a kid, I really loved history. I still do love history. But I was always like, I want to know about that stuff. I want to know about all the other history. I want to know about the battles. I want to know about the buildings. I want to know about how they lived, how they organized their society. I want to know about all that stuff. But the Bible doesn't tell us a lot about that stuff. So what is Jesus actually trying to tell us here? Whoever hears these sayings of mine and does them, I will liken him to a wise man who built his house on the rock. Maybe it's saying we need to read the Bible more. Maybe it's saying we need to read the Bible every day, and we need to pray every day. I mean, that's true as well, isn't it? Yeah? If I were to say, this is telling you that you should read the Bible every day, could you disagree with me? Like, is that wrong? What do you think? You guys aren't sure. Is it bad to read your Bible every day?
No.
Is it a bad message to tell people to read the Bible every day? No. Is that what Jesus is saying here?
Not specifically.
No. Good, Janelle. It's all right. You can be brave. You can be brave. Even if you're wrong, I'll just tell you. No. Good job. That's not specifically what Jesus is saying. Now, we have to hear the words. That's a prerequisite, right? So if we're not reading our Bibles, if we're not praying, if we're not going to church, if we're not listening to sermons or whatever, right, that's going to make the next step difficult. But that's not actually what Jesus is talking about, right? He's saying, whoever hears these sayings of mine and, what's it say? Does them. Is this legalism? Is this works religion? Is this prosperity gospel? What other permutations and variations can we come up with? Right? Is this made up rules? It's Jesus' sayings, right? Whoever hears these sayings. So what are Jesus' sayings? What did Jesus tell us to do that we should do? What do you think? The location of this text, I think, matters. This is Matthew chapter 7, 24 to 27. What is the context of these verses? The Sermon on the Mount. And what part of the Sermon on the Mount is this? The next verse says, and so it was when Jesus had ended these sayings that the people were astonished at his teaching. And the reason they were astonished is interesting. The reason they were astonished was not because it was profound or new or different. It was because he wasn't referencing the rabbis. He was simply going straight to Scripture and explaining and giving his teachings from Scripture, right? But what part of the Sermon on the Mount was this? It's the end, right? Because the next verse says, and when Jesus had finished talking, right? So this is, you could say, Jesus' appeal. This is Jesus' conclusion. This is the last part of the sermon when he's trying to get people to start applying what they've just heard. What they've just heard. There, I gave you the answer, right? So what is Jesus saying that we should be doing? The things that we've just heard in the Sermon on the Mount. Now, I'm not saying you can't apply this more broadly. I'm not saying it doesn't apply to Revelation or Jeremiah or whatever, right? It applies to all of it. But in particular, Jesus is saying, I don't want you just to hear the Sermon on the Mount. I want you to apply it practically. And the picture that he gives of applying it practically is building a house on the rock. Where have we heard that image before? Where have we heard that image before? Well, before we answer that question, what does that image feel like to you? What sort of memories or connections? If you're thinking about building a house or having a house that's somewhere, what is a house? I kind of already, in my title, I think I accidentally sent Fred the wrong word, or maybe I was still deciding on the title. But if I built my house on the rock, what am I actually building? My home, right? That's the purpose of the house, is to be a home, right? What's a home?
Where you hang your hat.
Where you hang your hat, yeah. Yep. Until yeah.
Stuff.
Okay, sorry.
Where you put your stuff.
Where you put your stuff, yep. Stuff is a big part of it. And what's the other part?
People.
People, yes. Sorry. Where you feel safe, yes. Where you have peace, yes. It's in there. It's in there, mate.
Where you have hot food.
Where you have food. This is right. This is not the wrong answer. Where you sleep. Yeah. Where you live. Right? So Jesus is using an analogy of not just anything, but a house. And a house that has to be built on the rock. So is there a house in the Bible that has to be built on the rock? Bible scholars.
I feel like there's lots of rocks.
Lots of rocks?
Yeah.
Okay, name one.
Important rocks. You know, like Jesus was buried on a rock.
Buried. Okay, yes.
You know, he was laid on a rock.
Yes. I know what you mean. He was buried in a cave. I never thought about that, but he was buried
There,
in a cave.
There's a rock, I don't know, where they believed in the temple in Jerusalem. There's a rock there.
Uh-huh.
They believe Jesus went to heaven.
Oh, you're talking about the Dome of the Rock?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
There's an
Yeah.
actual rock there, yeah.
Yeah, so in Mecca,
There's
yeah,
lots of rocks.
yeah. So all right.
I'm not looking at saying the same rock you want, I know.
No, you did. You said at the beginning and then you went off and talked about a bunch of others.
Oh.
What would be the one rock that you would think of when you think of rock in the Bible? Okay, yes. Okay, do you know the text? I haven't got the reference, but I can recite it. I say unto thee, thou art Petros, and upon this Petra I will build my church. All right, so is Peter the rock? Petros and Petra is not quite the same word. And in this case, the word is Petra. Now, they're very similar, but Petros is like a stone, and a stone which you can step on and trip over and whatever, whereas Petra is like Ayers Rock, or like a cliff, or like a big rocky hill, right? So thou art Petros, thou art a pebble, and I will build my church on what's the Petra?
A big rock.
Is it, does that prophecy in Isaiah where he says, I lay a foundation
Okay,
or something?
right, yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So who's the foundation stone? Peter? Is it?
Jesus.
Right. So what did Peter say to Jesus? What did Peter say to Jesus just before Jesus said, thou art Petros?
You are the Christ.
Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus said, flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, Peter. God has revealed this to you. Therefore I say, you are a pebble, and upon this massive mountain I will build my church. So Jesus builds his church on the confession of who Jesus is, right? A knowledge of who Jesus is. So you could say the rock is Jesus, but more specifically you could say rock is our understanding, knowing Jesus. Yeah? So
So if
I
you
said
know
church.
him well, it's a very small rock. Is that what you're saying?
If you don't know him well, it's a small rock.
Well,
That's an interesting. I had not thought of that. This is you're preaching to me now. So did Peter really know Jesus very well? No, he didn't. He had a little bit of faith, and it was enough, but he needed to grow. Yeah. So what is the church? Church is somewhere that you look at that's like, oh, that's nice architecture, and you go from place. You go on tour in Austria, you see all the beautiful churches. Go to Cologne, see the beautiful cathedral. Go to Melbourne. Is that what the church is?
usually made of stone.
They are often made of stone. No, this is true. I don't think that was an accident.
No, things of stone last forever.
Yeah. But what is the church?
The community, the people.
Yeah, the people.
It's the same difference between the house and the home, right?
Right.
So you build a house, it's
Yeah.
a building shell, like the people building in Papua New Guinea.
Yes.
It's a shell. But
The
what
shell.
makes this and what makes the training center something is the fact of the things that happen inside.
The funny thing about the word church in English, because other languages have different words for church, right? But the funny thing about the word church in English, it's the same word for the community as it is for the building, right? So in the Greek, the church community is the ecclesia, which was their word for like a democratic assembly, right? It's a completely different kind of word than what we think of as church. But we now have, since in history, there's been official government-made churches here in Australia as well as in Europe, and so the church became more of a government institution. It became more of a building, right, and maybe an administrative office for the government. So there's a kind of a radically different view of church. But I'm trying to get back to the remnant. I'm trying to get back to the original, the scriptural meaning, right? And it was a home. You're welcome. It was the house of God, right? So the church is the house that's built on the rock. So when we read the Sermon on the Mount, do we find a lot of teachings about personal salvation? Maybe some. Maybe that's not the primary thing that you get out of it. Do we find a lot of teachings about how to become a Christian?
Not really.
Not really.
Maybe how to be the one.
How to be one. Okay. So it's like the difference between hearing the word, having a conversion experience, and now you've got to do it. And this is the teaching which Jesus specifically gave us as a church, because he's building the church on the rock, right? This is not just a solo builder operation. Jesus was not a solo builder. Jesus was a builder, do you realize? Right? Jesus was a builder. The technical term that's used Joseph was a builder. We assume that Jesus also worked with Joseph in his occupation. I should say that's an assumption. But Joseph was a carpenter, which is in the Greek tekton, which was either working with wood or stone. They would have had to use some wood in construction, but primarily they built out of stone because wood was simply not available. Like they were talking about in the video there, it was very expensive. You had to import it, right? So Joseph was a stonemason, really, and a builder. And even the word stonemason, that's too highly skilled. He was just a basic labourer, right? And Jesus would have worked as a basic labourer. So he would have had all these other guys, and they would have all walked down to Capernaum in the morning with their lunchbox and their toolbox, build on the building site, and then at the end of 3 p.m. or something, they all walk home again. Yeah. So that was Jesus' career, if you like, before he went into ministry. So Jesus was a builder who built for a foolish man on the sand. Oh, great, darling. Yes, you coloured the cave in brown. And the pathway. You can finish the river too. So Jesus almost certainly helped to build the amphitheatre or the theatre, sort of not Colosseum level, but like largish theatre in Capernaum, which was built during the time when Jesus was in his 20s, right? So this is a foolish construction for foolish people, paid for by foolish people, built on the sand, right? But Jesus himself was building something different. He was building something different, right? He was building a home on the rock. So what about us? What are we building? Now, I don't think here we are building a Colosseum on the sand, but are people building Colosseums on the sand?
Yeah, the building our work in's built on the mud.
Sorry?
The building our work in's built on the mud in Docklands.
I won't say anything about your work particularly.
No, like they can't dig down to put the car park underneath. They
Yeah.
have to put it above because
Yeah.
we'll just fill up with water.
Yeah. No, I get it. And I won't pick on your particular workplace, but I wouldn't be surprised if they are building a Colosseum on the sand, figuratively as well, right? And we have to have jobs, right? We have to make a living doing something. Jesus himself, as I'm saying, sinless Jesus most likely worked on building a building that was designed for, maybe some of it was clean entertainment, but a lot of it was not, right?
I have 2 high school classmates who have moved to Saudi Arabia to build the Neon City.
Oh, wow.
The city is literally built on sand.
Yeah.
Almost figuratively. It's the Lion City that they're trying to build.
Yeah.
Supposedly. So they moved there to work on that project.
Yeah.
So like,
Yeah.
when you
It's the same concept.
Yeah, when you give me
Yeah.
this description, I just think
Yeah.
like they're doing literally the same thing.
Yeah.
They're building a city that's in the desert.
That's
on
right.
top of sand.
And they have to do that to make a living. They have to do that to earn money to live, right? And that was the same situation that everyone was in Jesus' day, right? So, they knew about building. But you can build your house on the sand, right? What does that look like? What does it look like to build your house on the sand? We don't even need Jesus to tell us about this, right? We see it everywhere. What are some of the things that are being built on the sand, figuratively? Yeah? What do you think?
We try to get rich quick.
Yeah?
Lotto schemes.
The lottery, yeah. Get rich quick schemes. Man, that's a tongue twister.
Relationships can be built on the sand.
Yeah, relationships can be too. So a relationship that's built on not a foundation of Jesus. Yeah. Okay. Anything else? I think a lot of churches are being built on the sand. You know, if you play loud enough music and you have free coffee or something, you can fill up a church. Is that your strategy? Is that your growth strategy? No? Just okay. All right.
There's no loud music.
No loud music, man. If you build a big enough building, people will come. This was, you know, build and they will come. That was the model of the last few decades. And it did work for a while. But what has been the result? Has there been a great growth in the kingdom of God? Has there been a great, you know, reaching of the nations because of people building big churches and playing loud music? And has that, I mean, there's been some people, I'm sure there's been some people that have come to God in those churches. So I'm not saying that they're all bad, but even if what you're building is good, if it's not built on the rock, will it last? Will it count for eternity? Is that the strategy? You're a small church plant, right? And thank you, Fred, for inviting me to speak. I was just planning to come and visit just because I enjoyed coming here last time. And Fred's like, oh, you can preach. So thank you. But you're a small church plant. You want to grow. Everyone wants to grow, right? Everyone wants to build a big building. The difference is it's a lot easier to build it on the sand. Right? It's just a lot easier. I don't know how much you know about construction, but if you build it on the rock, everything converts into dollars, right? My brother-in-law had to spend like $20,000. My wife could say exactly how much, chipping away rock because they found a big rock where they were building their house, right? There was just a big rock there. And the house we live in now, same problem, right? The rock is just this far off the surface, wherever you go, and you either have to cut into the rock or you have to kind of just squeeze everything in, you know? It's so inconvenient.
Building on the rock.
Yeah, literally. Yeah. And there were floods in our area a year ago, right? Pretty bad floods. And there was one day when we actually couldn't get from our house into town, right? But the house was perfectly fine. Absolutely well and truly clear of the water. There was some water upstream, but there was no foundation for it there was no sand underneath for it to wash away, right? So what does it look like to build on the rock? Let's have a look at some of the teachings that Jesus gave us and see if we can apply them. All right, so we'll try to do this together. Let's go all the way to the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount, almost right to the beginning. So we'll have now the end and the beginning, and then we'll sort of fill out the centre. Matthew 5, and we'll start in verse 13. So verse 13 to 16. All right, Matthew 5, verse 13 to 16. Who can read that for me?
I can read.
Thank you.
Matthew chapter 5, verse 13. You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made exactly again? Made salty again? It is no longer good for anything, except to be thrown out the trampled by men. 14. You are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before men, that they may see your good deeds and praise your Father in heaven.
Thank you. Okay, so maybe you were thinking I was making things up when I was saying this is about the church, but who is the salt of the earth? When it says you are the salt of the earth, who is the salt of the earth? Or you say, oh, that's me, right? It's just me individually. No, actually, the word you, and this is the good thing about, the word you, it's plural, all right? You can't, you can't see it in English because we don't have a plural and a singular you, but it's plural. Ye are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its flavour, how shall it be seasoned? It is then good for nothing but to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by men. I went through some of these gospel stories. I went through with a student of mine who was from Nepal, and I suddenly realised that he knew exactly what this meant because he was from Nepal. You know where the rock salt comes from, the Himalayan salt. right? So he knew they use rocks for their salt, right? So he knew exactly what this was doing. He could confirm that, yeah, that's how it works, right? So you've got a salty rock, and you just sort of put it in your soup or whatever, and then you reuse it, and then when it's used up, you have to throw it away, and it makes a good road, right? So the church is supposed to be the salt of the earth. Now, let's not get into too much detail about what that image might be, because Jesus doesn't stick with it long. He goes straight on to a different analogy. But let's just stick to the most simple point, which is that salt is valuable, salt is good. No, I know that salt's got a bad rap more recently, but back in those days, salt was definitely considered to be good, right? And salt is a household item, right? It's something that you use in your what? Your cooking, your food, all right? So Jesus is saying you should be the bit that makes the food good, all right? What's the next one? You are the light of the world. What sort of light? Well, the first analogy he gives is a city that is set on a hill. We stayed in the city last night, I think, for the first time, at least for the first time in a long time. We stayed in a hotel in the city, and we could look out and see the lights, and the kids were asking, why have they got the lights on? And I was like, well, that's just what cities do, right? Cities have lots of lights. It's a good question, how about light pollution. But cities have a lot of lights. Even in ancient times, it seems that cities, you could see them from a distance, right? And then it goes on, nor do they light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a lampstand, and give light to all that are in the house. So what is Jesus' point? Is his point about salt? Is his point about light or cities? No. Jesus' point is, let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. Now there's two key points to this. See your good works and glorify you, right? Is that what it says?
I think so.
Must be. That makes sense, because if they see your good works, then they should be thinking that you're a good person, right? What does it say? Let your light so shine in such a way, let what you do as a group be characteristically so that they may see the good things that you're doing, and instead of glorifying you, that they might actually glorify God. How do we do that? And I kind of posed that question to you last time. Almost everyone that was here last time, it's like a completely different group. But last time we were talking, and that was kind of where we got to at the end. It was like, how do we do this? And we didn't answer the question. So now we're going to look a bit at that. We don't have a lot of time, but I hope I've given you a grounding in how to begin to think about this. Because I'm not going to go through every one of the things that Jesus says in the Sermon on the Mount. There's a lot. But you can study them, and you can get more out of them than what you've already heard. Because what you've heard is just people talking about what to believe for salvation. But it's actually about how to be a church that will glorify God. So, we read about that. Now, what's the next one? What do we do? What about Matthew 7, verse 1 to 6? Matthew 7, 1 to 6. So we'll start with this one because it is probably one of the most popular, this first verse is probably the most popular verse in the Bible and the most misused. So Matthew 7, 1 to 6. Can I get someone to read that for me, please? Thank you.
Judge not, that you be not judged. For with what judgment you judge, you will be judged, and with the measure you use, it will be measured back to you. And why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but do not consider the plank in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, let me remove the speck from your eye, and look, a plank is in your own eye? Hypocrite! First remove the plank from your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. Do not give what is holy to the dogs, nor cast your pearls before swine, lest they trample them under their feet, and turn and hear you in pieces.
Thank you. Okay. So, it's a good thing we read all 6 verses. If we only read the first verse, we might have missed the point, mightn't we? All right. So the first verse, you just judge not that you be not judged. It's pretty simple, isn't it? Just don't judge anyone. What does it look like to not judge anyone?
To have no opinions.
Yeah. Yeah, dude, that's cool.
Even from our heart, sometimes you don't say it out, but you judge inside your heart. And if you feel it's okay, but it's actually not.
Okay, you're complexifying it. All right. So, yeah, dude, that's cool, but actually secretly, no, I didn't like that answer, right? So you can not judge, and a lot of people do this, right? They go through life, they don't judge, they simply don't have any principles, they don't have any opinions, they don't have any convictions, right? And so therefore they don't judge. And if this is our goal, if this is our high standard for life, which is, I see people do this, people don't give their opinions much in real life, but they do on social media. And so I'm on social media and I look at what people say, and they say this kind of stuff all the time. Don't judge, don't judge. Oh, if you're a Christian, you're not allowed to judge. Oh yeah, murderer? No, you're not allowed to judge because you're a Christian. Jesus says, do not judge. So, first of all, this verse was not actually written for non-Christians. And when you see non-Christians using it, don't worry too much about it because they have no clue what it means. And they couldn't possibly because it's not for them, right? It's for the church. And saying to the church, don't judge, that you be not judged. All right, why not? What's it say in the next verse? With what judgment you judge, you will be judged. All right, that helps us to understand a little bit more what Jesus is saying, doesn't it? Right, so he's not saying never judge necessarily, but he's saying be aware that whatever standard that I punish other people or discipline other people, I have to live up to that standard myself. Now that's a novel idea, right? That's not just everyone already does that or knows that. Sorry, people may say that they agree with that, right? But in practice, not so. Yeah, double standard is pretty standard. So be prepared to be judged by the same standard that you judge others. And then what about, here's a carpenter's analogy, so he definitely must have worked with wood. Why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye but not consider the plank in your own eye? Now, Jesus must have been making a bit of a joke here, right? Obviously, that's exaggeration. You can't have a whole plank in your eye, right? But people have pointed out that if you look at it from your own point of view, it is like a plank because it completely blinds you, right? But the speck in your brother's eye is very small. You have to have very good sight to be able to take that out. So if you've got a whole plank blind, if you can't see and you're trying to take a speck out of someone else's eye, most likely you're going to scratch their eye and make the thing worse. So what's Jesus saying? Is he telling us about how to be a carpenter, like OH&S training 101 for being a carpenter? I guess he learned it in OH&S training. But why is he telling us? It's not because he wants us to be better at taking out specks. What's he trying to say? Is he trying to say never correct someone else? That's what people say this means, isn't it? Never correct someone else. Because you must, if you're correcting someone else for doing something bad, if you're saying don't steal, you must have stolen something. That doesn't make any sense. If you're saying don't lie, you must have lied before. That's why you're saying that. You're trying to compensate. Don't people talk like that? Every time they're being judged or they feel judged, they will then say, oh, you must be secretly suppressing that you're doing the same thing. Yeah? Is Jesus saying that we can't correct other people? What's he saying? He's saying we've got to have our own inner introspection, our own inner repentance. So as a church, how often do we correct those who are outside compared to how we correct ourselves? How often do we challenge our own assumptions? How often do we challenge our own teachings and our own practices that they are like Christ? We're happy to point to the problems with the other churches, and I'm happier than anyone, right? Or I can tell you all the problems with all the churches. But what about us? Now that's not on. That's negativity. It's not negativity when it's the other churches, only when it's us. Yeah? So Jesus is challenging us to be first correcting ourselves before trying to correct others. And then verse 6, and the fascinating thing about verse 6 The people who love verse 1 don't like verse 6. Have you noticed that? They'll try to make you live up to verse 1, but they don't want you to live up to verse 6. Or maybe they say there's a contradiction, right? What's verse 6 say? Do not give what is holy to the dogs, nor cast your pearls before swine, lest they trample them under their feet and turn and tear you in pieces. So judge not, but decide who you're even going to tell the gospel to based on what kind of person they are. There's subtlety here, right? This is not just Jesus blasting statements and you just got to follow every statement at face value. He's teaching something subtle. He's teaching something challenging to understand, right? So we should be very careful how we judge people. For example, I don't want to be judged by the color of my hair or the color of my skin or whatever, right? So if I'm judging other people that way and saying, oh no, I don't like that person, different color skin, then I'm in the wrong, right? And that's pretty obvious. But what about, can we judge based on, is the person open and receptive to listen? If they're not open and receptive to listen, maybe we should judge and say, well, actually, it's been nice meeting you, and now I'm going to preach the gospel to someone else. Instead of just, oh, no, but you got to hear, I'm not allowed to judge. Maybe if I say it often enough, I'll get through. So we can be discerning, we can judge, but the way that we judge is how we would want to be judged. Yeah? Let's do a different example. Matthew chapter 6, verse 1 to 4. Matthew 6, 1 to 4. Someone read that for me, please.
Take heed that you do not do your charitable deeds before men to be seen by them, otherwise you'll have no reward from your Father in heaven. Therefore, when you do a charitable deed, do not sound a trumpet before you as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may have glory from men. Assuredly, I say to you, they have their reward. But when you do a charitable deed, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, that your charitable deed may be in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will himself reward you openly.
Thank you. So does anyone see the contradiction here? What did we say before? Jesus said, let your light so shine before men. And what's he saying now? Put it under a bushel.
Good deeds, yeah.
Hide it. What are you talking about, Jesus? Maybe Jesus got confused. Maybe Jesus was he was going through his sermon, he was making up as he went along, and he just kind of went off on a different tangent, changed his mind. What do you think? I don't think so. I think he knew what he was doing. So what was he doing? Take heed that you do not do your charitable deeds. What's that? Before men. What does that mean? You should do them before women? What's it mean when it says before men like that? Oh, it says to be seen by them. Be careful that you don't do your charitable deeds before men to be seen by them. Yeah? So, this is a very controversial topic in some corners of the internet. When you do something charitable, should you be filming it and saying, now everyone, like and subscribe, and if I get 1,000 likes on this video, then I will give another $1 to another homeless person. That's how Mr. Beast started, right? Giving money to homeless people, he got really famous that way. And I've always sort of wanted to defend Mr. Beast on that, because I feel like at least he's actually promoting charity. Like, a lot of people are like, oh, look at my car, look at my house, give me more money, right? But it's not actually about Mr. Beast. It's not about those people on TikTok or whatever. It's about us as a church. When we do something good, is it, we feel we have an image that we're a little bit unfriendly, unkind. Let's, put this money towards this charity and we'll have the proudly sponsored, have a little ad for our PR. All the companies do it. It must be, is it wrong for the companies to do it? Not necessarily. That's fine. But as a church, what is the purpose of our good deeds? Why should we do good deeds? Why do we do them? So that people can admire us? No. We do good deeds, and this is... let's go there. So Matthew 7, 21, 23. He picks up this theme again. Matthew 7, 21 to 23. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, shall enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father in heaven. Many who say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in your name, cast out demons in your name, and done many wonders in your name? Then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness. It's not the exact one that I was thinking of, but there's a parallel in another gospel, right? Where he says, when did we see you? When did I see you? And I was sick, I was naked, I was in need, and you helped me, right? So we should be doing good deeds because we love Jesus and because we have the heart of Jesus, not because we want people to see the good deeds and to think that we're good. Now that is difficult, right? We want to be purposeful, we want to be deliberate, but Jesus is challenging us at the heart of our motivation. So when I do a good deed, I could be thinking, what is the most popular thing I could do? What is the thing I could do that everyone will like? You know, maybe give something to a child that's sick in hospital, right? Everyone likes children, right? Everyone thinks that it's a good thing to help a child in hospital. Daryl does it all the time, right? But it's not a charitable deed that he's not trying to get credit for that. He's just doing it because he loves it, right? He could have had a different specialty. But as a church, are we thinking, well, what are the things that we can do that people will like? Or are we saying, what are the real needs that are not actually being filled? Who are the actual real people that are not getting any help? Who are the people that are actually marginalised? That, if you actually help those people, people won't like it. It won't be popular, right? Who are those people? I don't know. Maybe working class people, I don't know. Maybe in Australia that's not the case. In the UK it is, right? In the UK they're very class conscious. You can do anything to a working class person there and the government won't care. Yeah. So in your community, maybe there's someone that needs help and no one is going to give you any credit for helping them. Maybe it's a person who comes to the church, maybe they just need friends, right? Maybe they're not very friendly or not very easy to talk to or something. No one here, right? But maybe by helping that person, that's actually the Christ-like deed that you can do. But you're not going to be able to put it up on the wall and say, I talked to that guy that was awkward. You're not going to be on Channel 9 News, they're going to be featuring, look at this group of people, they talk to someone. Awkward. And yet, maybe that's building the house on the rock, right? Maybe doing the charitable deeds that everyone likes, that could be the sand. But doing the things that are hard, that no one celebrates you for, is the rock. Okay, I think we've got time for one last one. And it is, we will go Matthew 5, 43 to... let's just go 43 and 44. Just keep it to 2 verses. Matthew 5, 43 and 44. Who wants to read that?
You have heard that it has been said, thou shalt love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you.
Thank you. So what is Jesus saying here? Well, what do people think Jesus is saying here? People think Jesus is saying here, hate your neighbours and do charity to people you've never met. Isn't that right?
We don't lie.
No, not those people, because they're genuinely bad people. So no. Your enemies are the people you've never met, and therefore you should do nice things for them. But the people who are actually in your life, they're bad people. You shouldn't be friends. You shouldn't be nice to them, because that would be, that would be lack of boundaries. So that's what Jesus is saying. Yeah, that is pretty much the way people take this verse. Okay, so what does he actually say? You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbour. Who said that? Some stupid person? Some bad person? Some false philosopher or pagan priest or Jewish rabbi? Who said you shall love your neighbour? Yeah.
Jesus did, but it's also what, from the law of Moses?
Yeah, that's right. It's a literal quote from the Torah, the books of Moses. Jesus also said it, right? You shall love your neighbour as yourself. So the loving the neighbour bit is not the problem. Who would have thought? You're allowed to love your family. You're allowed to love your friends, right? You're allowed to care for each other in the community, right? You're allowed to, even you might say, do more to help each other than you might do to help someone you haven't met. However, people you haven't met is actually not a part of this verse at all. Who is your enemy? Who is your enemy?
People you don't like.
And people who don't like you.
Ah, yes, true. Both. But, I mean, it works the same way, doesn't it? When someone doesn't like you, you pretty quickly don't like them. Yeah. So that's how you make enemies. It's not hard. I think we all know. I've done it all. Yeah, I've done it plenty. So we're allowed to have enemies. We're allowed to have enemies. Otherwise, this verse is kind of meaningless. Like Jesus, we're allowed to have enemies, but you've heard it said, hate your enemy. But verse 44, I say to you, love your enemies. Now, this word love, you've probably heard before that in Greek they've got a few different words for love. In English, we're a little impoverished when it comes to the word love. We only have the one word. Or maybe we like to think of ourselves as nuanced. But which Greek word do you think this might be? If you guess the only one you know, you'll probably get it right.
Charity.
Yes, which in the King James is translated charity, but I don't like using that word because people think it means corporate welfare. In actual fact, agape, right? The Greek word is agape, and it means love. It sort of means divine love, but in human terms, it means an open welcome, an open door, an embrace, being willing to welcome the person into your home if they come knocking on your door, because their house got blown down in a flood, and they come knocking on your door, you'll be welcome and open to let them come in, even though they said bad things to you. And that brings us to, love your enemies is a broad statement. What does it say more specifically? Bless those who curse you. Now, what does it mean to curse someone?
Wish them ill.
Wish them ill. Yeah, say bad things about them, say bad things to them particularly, right? Has anyone ever cursed you? Now, you probably all think this is unique to you, but I've been walking down the street and had someone drive past me in a car and shout something rude at me. All right? Did you think that was just you, Daryl? No. No, I don't mean doing that. So we've all had someone do that. How do we respond? And you can go, is that how we respond? I mean, that's what they want. That's what they want, actually. How can we respond? Love you too. This is a common comeback, which, you can say that, right? Now, they probably don't even hear. But it's not about them. It's about you. When someone says something nasty to you, and you say something kind back, and you try to find a way to make it genuine, that's hard, right? That's where the hard work happens. But if you say something kind back, whether that changes them or not, it probably makes them feel less inclined to say something bad straight back again, right? But it also helps you not to internalize that curse, right? When it says bless, the meaning can include actually finding something good about the person, right? So I won't ask you to do it now because we're running out of time, but I want you to make an effort, maybe over lunch or something, to find something good to say about someone other than Daryl. He's got too much good about him. That's easy, right? I'll dibs Daryl. Okay. Find something good to say about someone and say it to them. Not to get anything and not to, not so that they'll say something nice to you. Just so maybe you should say something mean to someone so then they can say something nice back to you. How's that for a better... All right, well, you work it out. You work it out. Practice it. Try doing it. Now, what's the next one? Do good to those who hate you. Do good to those who hate you. Now, those who hate you are not quite the same as those who might say something rude or offensive to you. There's a bit more of a personal connection with hate, isn't there? Right? People who, in fact, the word is kind of, the word is where we get the word misogyny or misandry or misanthrope from. That's the Greek word, miseo, right? So it's kind of someone who has this kind of deep, irrational hatred towards you. But you can't help it, right? It's not your fault. They're just like that, right? They're just always against you all the time, yeah? So what does Jesus say to do for someone like that? Tell them they're a racist, tell them they're a sexist. That really works, right? That helps. That doesn't help much. What does Jesus say to do? Do something good. And when it says good, once again, that word good is not, that's like the word noble, wonderful, like something, not wonderful in the sense of like giving them $1 million or something, but like something that you, you're a good person, so you do this. Like, for example, you might treat them with respect, just basic respect and manners. Like, they come into the room and you say, good morning. Now, that's not necessarily a big deal. Like, you're not giving them a big gift or something, but you're being a good person towards them. Does that make sense? Even though they're being a horrible person towards you, you're being a good person towards them. And once again, it doesn't even necessarily say that doing this is going to change their behavior. It often will, right? But that's not the point. The point is that we need to be like Jesus, and we need to show what Jesus is like. And that's what he's like. That's what Jesus is like. When we hate God, when we're in rebellion against God, when we don't want to have a relationship with God, he comes looking for us. He comes seeking us. He's willing to die for us, his enemies. Yeah? Because that is who he is. He's not doing it because there's someone out there saying, I want to... yes, there are angels that are looking on and seeing how good God is, but that's not God's motivation. Jesus wasn't on the cross thinking, well, I'm putting up with all this pain and misery and humiliation, but at least the angels won't think I'm bad anymore. No. The angels knew that Jesus was good. They didn't need to see the cross. Of course, once they saw the cross, there was absolutely no question, right? It was all settled. The devil had absolutely no arguments to make after the cross. But it was simply in Jesus' nature to be loving. It was simply in Jesus' nature to be forgiving, to be sacrificing, right? There's a story that they tell from the Reformation where there was one of the Protestants was running across the ice to escape from the soldiers that were trying to take him in prison and execute him, right? And one of them fell into the freezing cold water. And the Protestant turned around and rescued this man from the water. Now, I'm not sure that I would have done that. I'd probably be too busy running. I mean, Reese would be kind of literally on the other side of the province by then. So, I'm not saying everyone has to do this, but this is an example of someone who, it was simply in his nature. He just didn't want to see someone drown when he could have saved him, even though it meant his death, because they still arrested him, they still executed him, right? But I don't think he went to his death thinking, I should have just escaped. I think he knew, well, I've done the right thing. I've been a righteous man through the power of Christ in my heart. I'm at peace. I'm at peace. Peace is so important. And now, final one. Pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you. And I really appreciate the way that Jesus doesn't tell us that we have to stay in an abusive or a dangerous situation. He says, pray for people who are trying to kill you. Yeah? You don't have to stay in a situation where your life is in danger or your physical health is in danger. That's not what Jesus says. When he says love your enemies, he's not saying to do that. Yeah? He's saying, if there's a situation where you cannot physically be in that person's presence because they're trying to hurt you, they're trying to kill you, you can still pray for them. You can pray that God will touch their heart. You can pray that God will change them. And that is hard. Because what you would really like is for God not to touch their heart so that they can be punished. Yeah, you'd really want them to be punished by God. But instead Jesus says to pray for them, as he himself did when he was on the cross. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. It is the same kind of love that Jesus has for us, that he wants us to have for each other in the church. Now, I hope that there are no enemies like this here in the church, but enemies happen, right? This does happen. As the church grows, as there are new people, it is impossible not to have hard feelings come up. But if you practice these things now, while it's easy, if you practice blessing each other, if you practice doing good and being good for each other, if you practice praying for each other, then when the hard times come, I pray that you will be able to be a witness of the love of Jesus in this community and beyond.